Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Janice Law. I'm the founder of American Women Writers National Museum. And welcome to all of you today. I'm so happy that you're here. And we're just delighted to have you here, particularly because today is our second anniversary. We finished 2 years. So we're starting our third year. The mission of American Women Writers National Museum is to honor America's premier women writers, historical and contemporary. Women purchase 70% of the books sold in America. Yet there was no national museum to honor us, to honor American women writers. And so 2 years ago, I started a museum like that. And you're probably wondering, perhaps it's called a museum. And usually museums have things to display. We don't have things to display yet. When I started the museum, I observed that usually when people start things like this, they start with a building. They start with that, bricks and mortar. But I started the other way. I started with programs. I thought we would get well known in the community, and then I would start with bricks and mortar. So temporarily, we're meeting in this rented space in the National Press Club, which is free to members. And so I'm very grateful to the National Press Club always for providing this great space for us. And we also have the 50 State Project. Every year, every month, we honor women writers from 4 different states. So before I introduce our fabulous speaker today, I'm just going to read that we're honoring women writers from Washington, West Virginia, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. If you want more information, you can look on the website on the State Meant For You page, and each state has dramatic excerpts from the great women writers from that state. So you can see some of their work and hear their work on the website. Today we are particularly honored with fabulous speakers. I want, though, to introduce a couple of people in the audience who are also fabulous people. One of them is Rosemary Placas. Rosemary, would you stand up, please? Rosemary is very humble. Her, and I don't know her exact title, but she's, I believe, Curator of Americana, Rosemary?
In the Rare Book Division, right.
Right, in the Rare Book Division of the Library of Congress. She's been there for 44 years, and she's having a
I don't have a cane yet either.
on March 20th, featuring the rare books of American women writers. They're going to be on display. And we're going to go film it for our archives. So keep in mind March 20th.
No wonderful lunch, but a wonderful repast of great women's works.
Also, I'd like to introduce Rosemary Schaefer. I'm sorry, Roberta Schaefer. Rosemary Placas, Roberta Schaefer. Roberta, I don't know her exact title. Associate
Librarian for Library Services at the Library of Congress.
Okay, Associate Librarian for Library Services. So we're very happy to have those persons here today. Our first speaker is Patricia Krider. Patricia came all the way here from Canton, Ohio to be our speaker. And she is Executive Director of the First Ladies Library in Canton, Ohio. Many of you may not know there is a First Ladies Library in Canton, but she will tell you a little bit about that. And she's also going to show some visuals of their exhibit called Eyes on First Ladies, which treats the relationship between First Ladies and the press, how the press treats First Ladies, and how First Ladies treat the press. Then our second speaker, I will go ahead and introduce her now. Oh, Pat. Patricia Krider is a magna cum laude graduate of Ashland University, and she also holds degrees from Walsh University and Stark State College. After Pat speaks, Anita McBride, who was for 8 years Chief of Staff for former First Lady Laura Bush, will also speak to us. And I understand, Anita, that you've been interviewed a lot lately about the President of France. Yes, oh, she said that they said that President France said she gave him a lot of opportunity for airtime. Anyway, Anita has had first-hand knowledge, obviously, of the relationship between the media and First Ladies, and she'll be in the second half of the program. Each speaker will speak for approximately 30 minutes. Anita holds a BA degree in International Studies from the University of Connecticut. She currently serves as executive in residence at the Center for Congressional and Presidential Studies, the School of Public Affairs at American University, Washington, D.C. And what we're going to do is we're going to have both speakers and then questions for both speakers at the end. So, want to step up, Patricia, and give us your remarks? Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Jay. Technology to work here. As Janice mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of the National First Ladies Library in Canton, Ohio. And our site is actually now the First Ladies National Historic Site. It's a unit of the National Park Service. And we, as a private partner, manage and operate the site. So the reason that we're part of the Park Service is basically to give the site prominence and permanence, because we're a nonprofit, and you know what happens with nonprofits? They go gung-ho for a number of years, and then all of a sudden they die out. So we're going to be around, whether it be the National First Ladies Library or the National Park Service people, for many, many, many years to come. And Janice, don't feel that you're unusual with not having a physical location, because when we were first founded, back in 1995, we didn't have a physical location either. Our website came first, and we were founded in 1995 and didn't have a physical location until June of 1998. So we went a good 3 years. Our website was actually unveiled by Hillary Clinton in the White House in February of 1997, before we still had a physical site. So that's my story. Janice and I, by the way, met a few years ago on a trip to Cuba. And she was starting this organization, and she wanted my card, and she said, we're going to keep in touch, and we have. And so I came last year for the first anniversary, and now I'm happy to be back for the second anniversary, and maybe spending more time in Washington, D.C. than I planned on, because my flight's supposed to go out tomorrow. We recently did an exhibit at the National First Ladies Library called Eyes on First Ladies, The Power of the Press. And what we wanted to look at was, technology, you gotta love it. We wanted to look at this fascination with First Ladies. And looking at the state dinner last night, you know, everybody wanted to know, what's Michelle Obama wearing? What woman is the French president going to bring, and what's Michelle Obama? But we've had this fascination with First Ladies, not just from the media, but advertisers and marketers use their images, and also the public. And the public has this fascination. They want to know about First Ladies. And the media, the stories that the media puts out, they will influence public opinion. And sometimes it's positive, and sometimes it's negative, because we believe what we read, unfortunately. And First Ladies, it's kind of a strange relationship. A lot of them want to have private lives, and they don't want to be mobbed by the media all the time. Some of them stay away from media altogether. But on the other hand, they need the media. They need that media to draw attention to their causes. And so I have some quotes here. They hate the intrusion into their lives. Louisa Adams says, put a little wool in your ears and don't read the papers. And, you know, Rosalind Carter on the other side says, you know, I know that I have influence, and I think it's my responsibility to draw attention to causes that I'm interested in. The fascination began way back at the very beginning. Martha Washington, Abigail Adams. Martha Washington, people didn't know anything about her. People wanted to know about her. Martha and Abigail Adams were very, very different First Ladies. So there was a lot of media coverage. Of course, back then, you don't have photographs. People wanted to know, what did she look like? What is she wearing? What is she doing? And, you know, Martha Washington said she felt like a state prisoner sometimes. She couldn't go out in the public. She couldn't do what she wanted to do. And if you could see this drawing, that is of Martha Washington looks nothing like her whatsoever. You know, it looks more like Abigail Adams or Louisa Adams to me. But that was the other thing, is what do you call her? You know, we got independence from Britain, so we didn't want this royalty thing, we didn't want kings or queens, but to call her Mrs. Washington just didn't seem like it was respectful enough. So you see the term Lady Washington. And they didn't call them first ladies for a long, long time, but you know, that's always been that struggle, is what is a respectful enough name without getting into the whole royalty thing. Abigail Adams was very politically astute. She was very outspoken, but she found that when she became First Lady, she had to kind of curtail her opinions. And her quote is basically saying that, I almost need someone to look over what I'm going to say and tell me yes or no, and it's very hard for me to keep my opinions to myself. And they called her Mrs. President, so very different than Martha Washington. Then we have Dolly Madison. Dolly Madison is effervescent. She's very social. She wants to be out in the public. And so the media has a whole different experience with Dolly. You know, Dolly becomes a heroine in the War of 1812 because she saves the state papers and she saves George Washington's portrait, and rumor has it she saved one of her own when the White House burned. She did a lot of entertaining. Another media celebrity was Frances Cleveland. She's young, 21 years old, marries the sitting president, Grover Cleveland, who is many, many years older than her. And so the media is just fascinated. This 21-year-old bride in the White House, married to this older man, kind of a strange thing going on there. And so there was tons of media attention. People wanted to copy her clothes and her hairstyle. And funny story, our education director portrays Frances Cleveland. And so I have to tease her all the time about this relationship between Grover and Frances. And you know, I'm like, come on, in today's world, he'd be like a predator. He knew this girl since she was 5 years old. And there's a quote that he gives one time. Somebody asked him, are you ever going to get married? And Frances, at 5 years old, happens to be standing there, and Grover says, well, I'm waiting for her to grow up. And then she grows up and he marries her. So our education director just gets so mad at me all the time. She's like, oh no, it wasn't like that. Yes, it was. You gotta have fun. Jackie Kennedy, another media celebrity, young, attractive. She's got these great, cute little kids. And again, the hairstyle, the clothing is emulated. Of course, we're seeing that now again with Michelle Obama. And then we look at the media just vilifying others. Rachel Jackson, the whole bigamy thing with her went on and on and on for years and was brought up in the presidential campaign and really kind of gave her health issues to the point that, you know, Andrew Jackson is elected and then she has a heart attack and dies before the inauguration. Mary Lincoln, she is vilified for her extravagant spending during the Civil War. Hillary Clinton, of course, you know, too involved with the administration. Nancy Reagan, too Hollywood. And then the media, for whatever reason, will ignore the good works of some of the other first ladies, like Lou Hoover. You know, Lou Hoover, very well educated, spoke Mandarin Chinese. She lived in China for a number of years. She was really involved in a lot of causes, including the Girl Scouts. She really believed in physical activity for women and could promote that through the Girl Scouts and a lot of other causes. Pat Nixon. Most traveled first lady up until Hillary Clinton, traveled all over the world, went everywhere. And when she did travel, she would do the things, the official things, the teas and the receptions, but she always wanted to make sure that she got to the hospitals, that she got to the schools. She wanted to see the people in their habitat. Very, very quietly advanced her causes. And, why would they ignore the good works? Well, you look at, Herbert Hoover during the Great Depression, he was not a very popular president. And then you have Nixon in the Vietnam War. And maybe those things took the attention away from those first ladies and the good things that they were doing. Some first ladies knew how to handle the press. They were good with it. Florence Harding, she managed her husband's newspaper, and so she created photo ops, and she brought reporters in. She used to bring women reporters in. She was very good. Lady Bird Johnson, she owned a radio station, and so she knew how to handle the press. We'll talk a little bit more later about her Lady Bird special campaign trip. But when she went down south on the train trip to campaign for Johnson, it was heckled and really had a hard time. And she would very quietly let people shout out whatever they were going to shout out, and then she would say, okay, you've had your say, now let me have mine. And she would go on totally unraveled. Julia Tyler, John Tyler's second wife, again a very young woman, she would befriend reporters. She actually had an engraving done of herself and let it be mass produced and sold or given out or whatever, so she wanted to spread her image around. Some tried to control the press. Edith Roosevelt and Jackie Kennedy wanted their children to have private lives, but they soon realized that the media wanted information. So what they would do is they would bring photographers in, and then they would release to the press these controlled images. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but they hoped that that would quench the thirst. Some were never good. Martha Washington, like I said, she felt like a state prisoner. Pat Nixon was kind of shy. She didn't really like that media attention. Bess Truman, and if you see the photo up here, Bess Truman and Margaret on the street somewhere, and she just doesn't look too happy. Even when her daughter is the reporter, there was a show on TV in the 50s. It was Edward Morrow show, I think, and he was not the host that day. Margaret was. That was one of her careers that she tried out, and it was like a day at home with the Trumans. And so Margaret's in the house in Independence, Missouri with Harry and Bess Truman. This is after the presidency. She cannot get 2 words out of either one of them. She's asking them questions, and she's giving, she's, hey Daddy, what's it like being at home? Are you enjoying being home now? Yep. That's the same thing, and they're sitting in their rocking chairs and they're rocking back and forth. Margaret had to be so frustrated because this is like an hour-long program and she just can't get any information out of them. The most animated person was the maid who pops into the room and, hi Margie, how you doing? I baked some cookies, come on into the kitchen. But Bess and Harry, they wouldn't give it up. Margaret Taylor, first ladies like that, they just kind of stayed in the background. Some were cautious. Nellie Taft, she wanted to be first lady. She wanted her husband to be president. But she enjoyed life, and she was afraid that the press would find out that she enjoyed drinking beer, she smoked cigarettes, she gambled, so she was a little cautious with the press. She didn't want to find them out. Barbara Bush, very outspoken, but learned that while she was first lady, she was better off aligning her opinions with her husband's. Lou Hoover, again, I mentioned her. She was in the public eye for many years, a very good public speaker. But once she became first lady, she kind of was wary of the press. She was uncomfortable with some of the things that they said about her husband. She didn't think it was true, and so she kind of pulled away. And then you have first ladies like Betty Ford, who were completely open. I mean, she just felt that, hey, if I let it out there, they'll be satisfied. She talked about her breast cancer, she talked about her addictions, and then, on the 60 Minutes Morally Safer show interview, she basically sat and said, Morley, you can ask me anything. So that was her way of handling it. And then we have the advertising in the media, the marketing, who just use first ladies' names and images, in every which way. Sometimes it's respectful, sometimes not so much. You have china pieces, you have candy boxes, you have Halloween masks. And here's just some examples. If you can see China, you have playing cards, Mary Lincoln candies, Dolly Madison cigar box, some little thing with Jackie Kennedy, and salt and pepper shakers. And then you have the not so nice, the bobbleheads, and that's the Reagan bedroom slippers. They also did a set of those for George and Barbara Bush, and then the Hillary Clinton. Yeah, we actually had those in our collection. I'm sorry to say, and they were on display during this exhibit. Frances Cleveland, I mentioned, her image was used so widely for products. It got to the point of ridiculous that the advertisers were making it sound like she used these products, and Congress tried to pass a law to prevent the use of a famous woman's image or name without their permission, and it didn't work, and then the media attention just got worse. And so here's some of the things with Frances Cleveland: calendars, liver and kidney pills, spices, just everywhere. And even the government gets into the act. You know, you see First Lady's images on stamps and coins. Martha Washington, her image was used on a silver certificate, and actually before her husband's ever was. So that was like 1886, I believe.
Do you know the Rosa Carter coin, what that's all about?
You know what? I'm not sure if that is actually a U.S. mint or if that was like a Franklin mint. I'm not sure which that one was. Yeah, it doesn't have a date, and it doesn't have, yeah. And then First Lady's images have become very integral to campaigns, and I'm using Ida McKinley as an example. Ida McKinley was used very, very widely in campaign materials because there was a perception in the public that she was an invalid and she couldn't perform her role. Why that became an issue in 1896, I can't tell you, because there were First Ladies before that didn't perform their role. But maybe because photography was more used, because we're getting into the age where we're even getting into filming, that it became more of an issue. And so the campaign managers used Ida's image on ribbons, on campaign buttons. They put out a campaign biography about her. And that would be the first Lady to have a campaign biography written about her. And, you know, just other ways of using the First Lady's image. We have Frances Cleveland again, Pat for First Ladies, We Want Amy, or Mamie, Jackie Kennedy, and just tons of those things go on and on and on. And so you see this fascination, you see this media attention, and you see that First Ladies, for the most part, try to curtail that attention. However, First Ladies also realize they need the media. They need them to promote their causes. They need the media to draw attention to their husbands' campaigns. And so they promote their causes in a variety of ways. They give interviews, they pose for photos, they give radio addresses. The radio addresses are good because they're controlled. No question and answer, this is my story, put it out there. TV talk shows. You see when Michelle Obama started getting into her Let's Move campaign, all of a sudden she's on all of the talk shows and there's all kinds of media. And even some of the First Ladies that we think of as being shy with the press, Jackie Kennedy. She does the whole White House renovation, and she goes on the TV show to promote this renovation. Nancy Reagan went all over with Let's Say No campaign. In fact, she appeared on the show Different Strokes with the whole Just Say No theme. Of course, Betty Ford in ERA. And more recently here, I don't know if anyone has seen this, Michelle Obama goes on Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah.
Jimmy Fallon. Let's get them mixed up. And they're doing this evolution of moms dancing, and it's all tied in with her Let's Move campaign. If you haven't seen this clip, it's a scream. You can get out on the internet and find it on YouTube. It's just the funniest thing. And then they hope for campaign coverage. You know, again, you have Eleanor Roosevelt out there campaigning, Jackie Kennedy, who did go out and campaign, speak to women's groups and different groups like that. You have You have Betty Ford out there at one of the political conventions, and even Bess Truman, who, you know, again, stayed away from the press. She still went on a whistle-stop tour with Harry for his campaign. And then I mentioned this earlier, Lady Bird did the first solo organized campaign trip for her husband, and she did it down through the southern states, and it was a really organized trip. I mean, they had little train whistles that they gave out, and matches and postcards, and there were menus planned for every stop. And she had this group of women that were with her that were dressed alike, and in every stop she'd go out and she'd give a little talk, and really LBJ gave her credit for helping him win the South for that election. And basically what the final word is that although they feel like they're living in a fishbowl, although first ladies feel like the press hounds them to death, they need them. They need each other. And so there's this fine line that they have to walk to how far can you push the press away to make sure that they're still going to come back when you need them. And I just have some final thoughts from our first ladies, because who can say it better than them? Pat Nixon, being first lady is the hardest unpaid job in the world. Betty Ford basically saying she had no idea how many responsibilities that there were going to be, and that it's a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week job. And you know, you think of Eleanor Roosevelt as someone who really embraced it, but she's saying here, you must live up to the standards just as any other first lady would have done. First lady is a little like the prisoner of history in the White House. Nancy Reagan, and I love this. I suspect that there are those who think that first ladies should be kept in attics, only to say our lines, pour our tea, and then be put away again. That's it. Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
I'll talk as loud as I possibly can. Thank you, Janice, for inviting me to be part of this, and Pat, I always love hearing your presentations. In fact, this is the second time I've attended this event. Of course, it's only the second anniversary, but last year I came as a guest to listen to Pat's presentation because I saw an announcement that she was going to be here, and I always love to hear about First Ladies from the National First Ladies Library because they have all the information captured for us in one place and a terrific website where we can learn about our First Ladies and have a fact a day about them, which we often look. I'm here with my graduate student assistant, Alexandra Thornton, we're at American University. We work together on the Legacies of America's First Ladies conferences, and we try to promote their story as much as possible. So when I came last year to hear Pat speak, Janice was kind enough to just ask me to come up and impromptu offer a few words, and so here I am this year. I'm invited to be one of your speakers, and I'm delighted to do that. I love this topic. I had the good fortune to work in 3 White Houses and to see 3 First Ladies up close, Nancy Reagan and Barbara Bush and Laura Bush. Obviously my experience working with Laura Bush as her chief of staff gave me a bird's eye view to history. And I saw a completely different perspective on that role, and one that I could say I'll pick up from Pat's summary is just how hard they work. And from the quotes of 2 First Ladies that you referenced, Pat Nixon, it's the hardest unpaid job in the world, and Betty Ford saying too, I didn't realize this was 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, and just how many decisions that I had to make. In fact, the executive director of the Reagan Library, John Highbush, wrote a fictional account of the role of First Lady that he did in the form of a want ad, which is actually quite humorous and quite funny. I'm going to read a couple little pieces from it because I've used it at the conferences that we've hosted through American University and that we do in partnership with the presidential libraries. We've hosted 4 so far, and we're in consultation with several libraries to do a few more. This is a topic that people are very fascinated with. So let me just read this to you, and I think this will paint a picture for what it's really like for these women who have held this position. So it's called Help Wanted, First Lady. Most powerful nation on earth seeks a First Lady. No previous experience is necessary. Willingness to relocate to Washington, D.C. is a must. The hours, 6 a.m. to midnight, Monday through Friday, weekends included. Employer seeks the impossible. Demonstrated perfection as a human being required. Willingness to undergo scrutiny as the most famous woman on the planet, 24/7, from hairstyle to positions on peace in the Middle East. Superhuman multitasking is a must. Background in planning of state dinners, hosting of international summits on foreign soil, standing in for weekly national radio addresses, defense of spouses' public positions on over 1,000 issues, and flawless media performances before mobs of cynical reporters is preferred. The salary, 0 and non-negotiable. Benefits include exciting travel alone to exotic, war-torn, and disease-ridden destinations. Intense scrutiny of family and round-the-clock security by men and women in dark suits and sunglasses living at your home for the rest of your life. Minimum 4-year requirement, and apply in person at the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I think it's very funny, but it really does sum up what their life is like in the fishbowl and in the public eye. And the most difficult thing is to try and maintain a private life when you live in the most photographed and really most important residence in the world, and living with the leader of the free world. I like to categorize the relationship of first ladies in the press in 3 ways. 1, their fashion. We just can't seem to get away from that, whether it's the 18th century or the 21st. It's their fashion. 2, can I catch you in a difference with your husband's position? And 3, they're typecast at the beginning. However they're reported on when they start the job is somehow how they are continued to be covered, no matter if it's 4 years or 8 years, or no matter what they do. And I'll give you some examples of that as we go through. But I will say this, first ladies want to be seen as the individuals that they are. They don't want to be compared to the others before them, but they're very conscious of the role each of the women that has come before them have played. They're usually more popular than their husbands. That's helpful. We've had examples, of course, of first ladies who haven't been through years. But they're very conscious of the press. And most of them, some of them are very good at navigating the treacherous waters of political journalism, and some are not. Every first lady's been plagued by a trick question here and there from the press to catch them differing from their husbands' positions. And again, that point that some are better at it than others. I will say that I feel in our study at American University, when we are reviewing the history of our first ladies, I don't think anyone other than Mary Todd Lincoln had it as bad with the press. And Pat, you could support that or not. Tell me, I mean, you know more. But she was so keenly aware of the perception that the country had that her husband was not sophisticated and came from the country. And could he really uphold this position of president, of the United States? So she was focused on how the attention was portraying him differently than what she knew he could be. It contributed to a lot of the lavish spending, the wild spending for not only her own wardrobe, but also the refurbishing of the White House at a time when the country was, of course, on the verge of war and at war. So she was so highly criticized for these lavish costs and for being insensitive to what was going on, in the country. But her goal was a pure one. Like any devoted spouse, she wanted the world to see that her husband was capable of competing on the world stage and holding the union together. And so she suffered for that. In addition to, of course, having brothers and cousins that were on the Confederate side of the war, and while the country was being torn apart, and here her husband was trying to preserve the Union. And then, of course, losing a son in the White House, and who can imagine having anything as painful as that. I'm not going to run through every First Lady because Pat's done such a great job with that, but to the point that some First Ladies knew how to better handle the press. Edith Roosevelt was the First Lady to hire a social secretary, Isabella Hagner, who was a Washington native, who knew how to handle social events and the press, and knew how to really help her and how to deal with the public and how to manage those increased demands on her official life and to maintain the hostess duties while raising a large family, a boisterous family, in the White House. She was weary of the intrusive press, but she knew how to use it carefully, stage manage the photos that were out there, again to Pat's point, feeding the beast a little bit. People like Florence Harding had great experience with the press. She managed a newspaper with her husband, Warren Harding, that they owned in Ohio. She felt it was important to hire women to manage the paper. So she was an early supporter of women's rights, and the presidency of her husband was the first one where women could vote. Since she was the First Lady to vote, to fly in an airplane, to operate a movie camera, and she was a popular First Lady. They invited a lot of movie stars to the White House. They loved Hollywood, they loved the movies. They reopened the White House and the grounds to the public after the Woodrow Wilson years, where the grounds were closed by Mrs. Edith Wilson. But it was not, widely reported in the press about her poker parties and serving liquor, even though the 18th Amendment, of course, made it illegal at the time. Grace Coolidge, the First Lady during the latter 20s, was popular while she was First Lady and also very popular with the press afterwards. Her personality was an antidote to her husband's shyness. And she was voted one of America's 12 greatest living women in 1931. So she was considered a very popular and positive influence while her husband was in office. Who can say any more about Eleanor Roosevelt? We know everything that she has done. One of the most widely studied and reported and books that have been written about her. And she understood and recognized the fact that she was in a position where she can do a lot of good and to help a lot of people. She became the eyes and the ears for her husband. And traveled so much on her behalf. In fact, I think you mentioned to me about the C-SPAN conference, or somebody in here mentioned about the C-SPAN show. So the legacies of the First Ladies, their influence and image. And one of the interesting things that came out about Eleanor Roosevelt in the C-SPAN series, which has been so terrific and just finished up last week, was that when she traveled on behalf of her husband and went to visit our troops and flew out to Hawaii, where a number of our wounded troops were after Pearl Harbor, and she walked what was the equivalent of 5 miles of corridors visiting our wounded, and that she flew on an aircraft, uninsulated aircraft, ruptured an eardrum, arrived, went right to the work that she had to do to visit our wounded military, and all in her saying, did it in a skirt and high heels, and that all of that, contributed to her having flat feet, and she was never, able to walk comfortably again without having supportive shoes. I just thought that was really such an incredible little anecdote about her, just with a stealth character that she was. And of course, we knew she held press conferences, she invited women, members of the press, to the White House. And so she was she was controversial, but she was a woman leader. And I think that's a way that all these women that are in these positions want to be viewed as individuals and for who they are, for the strengths that they bring, and to be seen as contributing in the short period of time that they have an opportunity to be women leaders in the White House, to contribute to our history. People like Bess Truman didn't really like to be in the press, as you showed, and I think they really appreciated the fact when the White House was under renovation for so long during the Truman administration, so that they can live in Blair House and really keep social entertaining to a minimum. So it really contributed, even though the White House is falling apart, you know, it contributed to them being able to have a little bit more of a private life, because the three of them, husband, wife, and daughter, they were a unit that was so intact and so strong. Jackie Kennedy was so smart to hire a press secretary. I think am I right, the first lady to hire a press secretary and a White House curator. She understood the value of protecting our patrimony that was in the White House for so many years in our early history. Of course, if presidents moved into the White House and didn't like the furniture that they found, they could put it out on the South Lawn and somebody could come take it, or it could be sold. I mean, we're still finding, I'm on the White House Historical Association board, and one of our major goals, of course, is acquisitions of White House artifacts, things that belonged there, that were part of the White House, that maybe disappeared over time. And we're finding things in people's homes and you know, all over, particularly in the Northeast. It's really interesting. Well, it's a good use of our endowment, let's say, is to bring these things, you know, back to the White House. Lady Bird Johnson, you know, of course, she knew the power of the press. She owned and operated radio stations, and she understood the value of how you relate to the public and how important it is. And she would critique her husband's public appearances. And there's one very famous recording of her that's often played by the National Archives, a recording of her critiquing Lyndon Johnson after a speech where he solicited her input. How did I sound? And she said, well, I give it a B at best. And she went on with further explanation to exactly what he needed to do to correct the way he was addressing the public. And she just said he talked too long and used too many sentences. Be short, be pithy, get your point across, speak more clearly. Can you imagine telling Lyndon Johnson that? Who else on his staff? There's the power of a first lady's role too, you know, which is sort of this mystery to them. What is the pillow talk that goes on, you know, between the president and first lady? And I think they're all very conscious to not be portrayed as influencing a policy, but to, you know, bring another perspective to the president before decisions are made. And, you know, they're not the elected official. This is such a fine line. All of them have walked. You know, we didn't elect them to be there, but we expect them to do something and use their very unique position with the president for good, and to do something, certainly on our behalf. We talked about Pat Nixon, you know, how shy she was, but she was bold in her own right. You know, she was the first lady to wear pants in public. And when she responded, you know, to questions from the press about certainly all the controversies that her husband was involved in, and again, back to this question of trying to get the first lady to differ from their husband's position, she would just simply say, I love my husband, and I believe in him, and I'm proud of his accomplishments. And that's, you know, again, if we can put ourselves in their shoes, here is the person they love most in the world. And when they are, rightly or wrongly, obviously we know Richard Nixon did some bad things, but that doesn't change the dynamic between a husband and a wife, and to be there for each other through good times and bad. And when this is the person you love most in the world, you know, treated that way in the press, and by the public as well, you can't help but feel you need to provide a sanctuary around them and have as normal a family life as you can, because at the end of the day, that's all that they really do have left. We know how much Betty Ford did for our country, and we are so lucky for her courage and how she used the power of the media and the press to help so many people in our country, particularly women, helping to reduce the stigma of a disease that was in the closet and was not being treated and handled the way that it should by medical professionals as well. So she changed the world, and as her life after she was First Lady, she continued to do that by raising awareness on drug and alcohol abuse. I mean, she took something so private and so difficult and that was stigmatized and turned a chapter in our country, that's for sure, and a message that we were able to take around the world. I know in my work with Mrs. Bush, where we launched breast cancer partnerships all over the Middle East and in South and Central America and Europe, this was the example we would hold up. Betty Ford and Nancy Reagan, who used their courage to raise awareness on such a deadly disease. Barbara Bush was very plain spoken, there's no question, but she was rarely ever tricked by the press. And sometimes, you know, she had such an innate ability to get away with whatever it was that she said. There was something that people really connected with her personality and her realness. And she did some bold things too. In 1990, when she went to a local a home for AIDS orphans here in Washington, D.C., and, you know, held an AIDS baby. It was a message that reverberated throughout the entire activist community on HIV/AIDS, because people really did think you could get AIDS from shaking someone's hand or from, you know, contact that was, you know, very simple. And that was a very natural thing for her to do. She never really thought twice about it. I'm not sure she even really understood the power of the image at the time, but it is still something that's very much talked about, and advocates in that space who really felt they could not count on Republican administrations, the Reagan administration before and the Bush administration, to really do anything on this crisis. They were really surprised and heartened by that. And she was a very vocal behind-the-scenes advocate for the Ryan White CARE Act for HIV/AIDS, so I would have to give her a lot of credit for that. You know, there's not enough time to talk about the power of the role of First Lady under Hillary Clinton. She just breaks barriers every place she goes and in every position that she has had. And it wasn't easy. When she came in, the whole 2 for 1 thing did not sit well with the American public. They weren't ready for that. I'm not sure we ever truly are. We want our First Ladies to do something and to use that privileged position in a way that benefits us. But to really be handed an issue, to be solely responsible for it, and to be the one driving the train, we just weren't ready for that level of advocacy. Or that level of involvement. And she learned a lot from that experience as well. She certainly was wounded by that, but she found another outlet. She found the outlet around the world to speak out for women's rights, and she continues to do that, and I think will certainly go down in history as being one of the most important leaders in the world for women's rights around the world. And she certainly made that a central part of her time as Secretary of State, where one of her, I think, greatest successes there has been the fact that the issue of women's rights is integrated into everything that the State Department does. Every bureau, every ambassador, every post, every division, but not only at the State Department, but with our foreign aid agencies like USAID, and then with other agencies of government as well. And I think that's a really important, when she was in the position as a policy maker, both on Capitol Hill, but then in the State Department, she had great effect and we are women around the world owe her a great debt of gratitude, as they do to Laura Bush, who had the courage to speak out, deliver the presidential radio address, the First Lady to do that, to really raise awareness for Americans and for people around the world about what was happening to the women in Afghanistan. And speaking after the fall of the Taliban to explain to people what was happening to women and how could we turn our eye on them. She also, or turn our eye away from them. She also filled a role in our country that we needed after 9/11 by providing comfort to all of us and reassurance that life would go on, and did what instinctively a teacher and a mother would do, as tell parents, turn off the television, protect your children, tell them that they're safe. The most basic thing, but I think all of us were so shaken by those events, and her calming voice and reassurance, even though she was not really so well known for what she was going to do at that point. 9 months into the administration, she just had the first book festival thanks to the partnership with the Library of Congress, which we're so grateful, into its 13th or 14th year now. She just had their first state dinner. She felt like she was just getting her footing as First Lady. And both she and the President thought this is the way that it was going to be. She had been a vocal advocate for education reform and No Child Left Behind. But then 9/11 happens. And this is something where we do test the strength and the abilities, I think, of anyone that's in public office. Is how do they respond? How do they make us feel better? What do they draw from? What are the inner reserves that they draw from to be able to affect all of us here in the country? And I think that is something, that message to Americans, to remind kids that they're safe, and those letters to the schools is definitely something came very naturally to her, but it had an impact on our country. She showed a side of her that most people didn't know was there in 2005. She showed a humorous side when she delivered the President's speech at the White House Correspondents Association dinner. She was very nervous about it. It wasn't supposed to be that way. She was supposed to deliver a funny little speech at the Radio and Television Correspondents Association dinner, but that happened to be when Pope John Paul II died, and we all went to Rome for the funeral. And so somebody else stepped in, a very funny guy, Vice President Cheney, stepped in for her humor. So he stepped in for her at that, and the President had, said to her, well, why don't you just do White House Correspondent? Well, that's the Oscar Awards of the press dinners, right? So she practiced it. She had a very funny speech. She practiced it a couple of times. She had a line in there about Barbara Bush being sort of like Don Corleone. And I'm Italian American, so I practiced this line with her, Don Corleone, because she really had a little difficulty pronouncing that. And so that I just remember it very vividly. But when she got up to deliver the speech, it was, the President got up to do it, and then she came to the podium and nudged him over aside, and there was an audible gasp in the room because no one thought this shy little retiring librarian, going back to the point of how she was typecast in 2001, could ever get up there and deliver a funny speech about being the desperate housewife and going to Chippendales with Lynn Cheney and Connie Rice. Nobody expected that out of her. It was wildly popular. And people didn't realize she had a sense of humor. But I will tell you, with the humor that we have here at home doesn't necessarily translate when you're traveling overseas. We had a foreign trip not long after that, sitting at a lovely breakfast in the Netherlands, and a group of women who were coming to meet her and talk about projects they were engaged in. And one of them really asked, a desperate housewife. And didn't understand the whole like, what's Chippendale? So we really, it was very, very funny. It was, all over again, it just made you think, wow, you have to be, our culture, right? Our cultures don't necessarily all translate, but it was very, very funny. we had a great run. We went to 67 countries in 4 years. She did a total of 78 in 8 years. But those 67 countries were like some of the places that are written in a fictional ad. They were war-torn and disease-ridden. 15 countries in Africa on 5 different trips, 3 times to Afghanistan, deep into the border of Burma and Thailand to meet with refugees. They were not easy, they were difficult, and I bet the majority of people in this room don't know a lot of that. Back to Pat's point, the First Ladies want to use the press to get their message across. It's not always easy. The press want to cover what they want to cover, and when you are in such a controversial and consequential presidency as the presidency of George W. Bush, it is very hard to get the messages across. 24 trips to the Gulf Coast after Hurricane Katrina, reopening schools, reopening libraries, going to job training skills, reopening hotels, going to new restaurants when they were reopening, building playgrounds. I know the majority of people in the country don't know that. That doesn't stop you from doing what you need to do and having the impact you feel that you can have at the ground level, at the local and community level, because people around the country in small towns and big cities, but in small towns and in rural America, really appreciate when the First Lady of the United States shows up in their town and sees the work that good people all over our country are doing, no questions asked, but from the volunteerism spirit that each of us have, that we're blessed with in our DNA in this country. And that is something that First Ladies have an obligation to do, is shine a light on what Americans are doing, and people around the world, how our goodness and our generosity here at home helps people around the world too. Americans do need to know that. They need to feel good about our contributions. We don't do everything right. Of course we don't. And that was something Mrs. Bush was faced with too, of course, when she's traveling overseas. All these trips to the Middle East, where we're bringing a breast cancer partnership to Saudi Arabia. I mean, can you imagine even talking about the word breast there? And the impact that going to do that. But what did the press cover here? They covered the fact that she was given an abaya made by a group of Saudi women. They had sewn pink ribbons on it. They handed it to her as a gift. In a moment of a sweet gesture, she put it on, and that's what was covered, that somehow she's showing a greater sensitivity to Muslims than she should be. That was really startling for us, but it comes, Laura Bush's response, it comes with the territory. It just does. You have to be with her. You have to have a thick skin. You have to keep doing what you're doing. We all learned a lot working with her. Our staff, mostly women, we had a few men, but none of them really ever kept up with us, so we along the way. And she was a good example for never really taking the bait and never contributing to a firestorm. And just a good example of grace under pressure. I really learned a lot. And I'm, watching with great interest how Mrs. Obama has been very focused on the projects that she engages in. She will always be known for Let's Move and for childhood obesity and for contributing to Americans' awareness on how we need to eat more healthily. And we have to start at a very young age. Whereas Laura Bush was doing so many things, it's harder to identify the single thing that she is involved in. Preservation, National Park Foundation, all these things. She hiked the national parks, all our national parks. It's harder to, at the National Book Festival, hopefully she'll, always that's her legacy she can leave behind. But when you do so many things, it's harder for people to understand exactly where you have had the greatest impact. And that's why I really give credit to Mrs. Obama and her team, many of them who I know very well, and they're my friends. We worked through the transition very carefully with one another, and I got to know Mrs. Obama as well. She came to Africa this past summer, where she and Mrs. Bush did something together on the stage in Tanzania in front of a group of African First Ladies who were really moved by the visual and the message of having two women on opposing sides sitting together talking about the similarities of being in this role. And you know, for a lot of these post-conflict countries in Africa, they would no more be sitting in the same room with each other, and or it would come to blows. I mean, that's just how our message. So we need to feel good about that. We need to feel good that we project that image. It's hard when you're in Washington and you're surrounded by the rhetoric of everything that our politicians can't do together. Sometimes it takes these women to rise above it and to, you know, really show that message of unity. So I do, I'm watching with fascination of what her remaining 3 years will be, what the other project that she may want to take on. She may not want to. She may not want, she may want to stay focused on the one that she is. That's the prerogative First Ladies have. They don't have a position description, nobody pays them for their job. Yes, they have wonderful perks living in the White House, no question about it. But they get to pick and choose what they want to do, unlike the president who has every problem in the world come to the desk of the American president. Of course they're not going to be popular because of some of the tough decisions they have to make. So First Ladies have a chance to rise above that. So I think between the two of us, I think we've captured just about everyone. We probably, you know, put little notes here and there that we didn't cover, but I'll leave you with this. No matter what these women do, they're always going to be remembered for what they wear on the front page. And Janice said that, yes, I've been, you know, busy doing a lot of rounds of interviews about this state dinner. And it was, yes, I have to say, I credit President Hollande for turning a very private situation into public airtime for me, but it was about how the White House would handle the fact that he was coming stag. Well, we handle it just fine. We've handled plenty of leaders that have come a stag, and thankfully, you know, that was not as much of the coverage of the dinner, which was great. But I'm the first one to say she looks absolutely elegant and beautiful. But we all look forward to the day when there is a first man in the venue, and that at the Smithsonian, the case that is made will hold the inauguration suit that he wore when he was holding the Bible first. Right? So thank you.
All right, well, thank you. That was fascinating, and funny, and gracious and everything. These women are just absolutely terrific. So now are the question period, and say whether you would like to address your question to both women, or if you'd like to address it to a specific woman. And I'll try and repeat it so that it will be on the video. I guess in the back, I'll start with the back. Was someone back there have your hand up? No? Okay. Go ahead.
Ann Haynes used to work in the White House. Ann, you must have a question. No? Okay.
How about here?
Well, you said that women's roles, their perception of the First Lady doesn't really change. But I thought Hillary sort of improved after she underwent a makeover and she was in competition with Reza Gorbachev.
I'll just repeat,
Yes,
the question. Did Hillary's makeover, was it influenced by her relationship with Reza Gorbachev?
Well, the competition with Reza
The
Gorbachev
competition.
and
Okay.
did it
Nancy
improve her?
Nancy Reagan's competition.
Oh,
with,
Nancy.
Right?
Yes.
Did her image change? I think her image changed in the end of the. I think her image changed towards the end of the second term. Pat, would you agree? Where she was seen, you know, more as helping to encourage her husband with to take a different stance with the Soviet Union. So I think she was seen a little bit differently. And yes, was there a competition between her and Raisa Gorbachev? You know, these were two tough women.
Yep.
And you know, neither one of them were. I think they certainly weren't shy and retiring, and they made their points. You know, they. I don't know. I think I would say, if your question was, did Nancy Reagan's perception change in the public eye? Yes. Did her competition with Raisa Gorbachev, you know, contribute to people's understanding of her? I think they weren't surprised to hear that she would feel a little bit of competition with Raisa.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
Now with Hillary Clinton, she also midterm went through a makeover, and it seemed to me that when she did the makeover, she was much better accepted and you know, going back to the role of fashion.
Yeah.
What do you think about the need for a first lady to be beautified?
Well, I think, you know, we all want to feel that our first ladies are gracious and represent us beautifully and represent us well, and so, you know, maybe whether that's right or that's wrong, they're conscious of how they look in the public eye, don't you think? So I think the makeover with Mrs. Clinton, yes, I remember seeing a montage of photos of the different hairstyles that she had. Do you sort of remember that? Like once a month. And there was all this kind of psychobabble about it. Oh, she had trouble, what's wrong? She, you know, all this kind of psychological interpretation of that. But I don't know, do you think that she was trying to find a look that made her feel comfortable?
I think she was, and I think she was probably sick of the,
People are saying they can't do it.
Oh, okay.
and I think she was kind of sick of the criticism of her. And, you know, I remember as when she was Secretary of State, even her staff was saying, you know, we just want to die when she pulls her hair back in a scrunchie and, you know, and then I forget where she was as Secretary of State, but someone asked her about her appearance, and her answer was something along the lines of, are you kidding me? We're here for these important issues and you're worried about my appearance? Like, you know, I don't care. That's not what it's all about. You know, and I think it's recent years that we've become so focused on appearance. Because, you know, for many years, first ladies were what they were. And, you know, it is a shame, but, you know, even the comments about Hillary running for president. Years back, she said, well, I'm not going to oppose President Obama. So my next opportunity would be 2016. And I'm probably gonna be too old, because she's a woman. Because we've had them who have been that age. But now, you know, everybody's focused on, well, how does she look? But she doesn't look like real good. It's like, she's fine. It's just, it's crazy.
I know, I find it hard as a parent of teenagers, and I'm always telling them your appearance matters. You know, I guess I'm one that kind of wants the people who represent us to, I'm willing to give them a pass when they're traveling all the way around the world, I really am.
But you either have good hair or you have
I
bad hair.
know, that's
I'm Catherine Ski, the Chicago Tribune, and I cover the Obama White House. And I have two questions, please. And thank you for your great presentations, Patricia and Anita. This has always been a curiosity to me, and I'm sure it varies with the cities, but how much news, newspapers, magazines, TVs, about themselves do the first ladies actually consume, or is it something they can relegate to their staff, and how does it impact them? And my follow-up would be, if you could give them, let's say the next first lady, 3 bits of advice in terms of fostering a good and helpful relationship with the press that advances your own interests, what would that advice be, please?
To your first, can I answer the first question first? Definitely every First Lady's office has a press secretary, and they're compiling the news, and they're compiling the media, and they're compiling the clips, and would send it up in a report. At least there's, you know, 2 White Houses where I saw that, you know, happen, and sending the reports for them to see. In terms of how much they're reading it cover to cover, I really don't know. I never saw Mrs. Bush really be much of a slave to what was happening in the news, or, you know, how she was covered. She would read it. She was, if it was something that was not, you know, positive, she'd say, well, that's the way it is. She never really got very agitated about it. There were some times where things were categorically wrong, and she would say to her press secretary, just get a correction for that, and sometimes that would work and sometimes it wouldn't. But certainly their staff is there to compile what's in the news, because you are trying to see how much coverage you're getting for the things that you're doing, you know, in addition to how you look. That's your first question. The second question, what would you advise? What would I advise? 3 things. I would say, going back to my earlier point, that you are defined, the way you are defined when you come in is the way you're going to be defined your entire time. So you're going to pick an issue or something you're going to be engaged in. If you can get that out early and stay focused on it, because the press will follow if you are staying consistent with that. I think the other thing is, people want to know you're happy in having this job and really convey a sense that you understand what a privilege it is to represent the American people. Let people know that right in the beginning. I think that contributes to their endearment towards you. And the third, I don't know, I better think about the third. Maybe Pat has a third.
I think maybe my third would be that I think that first ladies should realize that they do need the press, that they do need the media. And instead of shunning the media, I think that they should provide ample opportunity. I'm not saying let the press and the media follow you around 24 hours a day, but don't shut them completely out and then turn around and say, oh, I've got a cause and you don't want to cover it. If you provide ample opportunity, whether it be a press conference every couple weeks or, putting out press releases or whatever, I think that would be really helpful. And I think then it would go both ways. Oh, we're going to be more inclined to cover something that Mrs. So-and-so has to say because she opened the doors to us.
Pat raised a good point, and thanks, but it was more talking about projecting yourself to American people as opposed to the press. We did at the very end of the administration in the fall of 2008, we had a luncheon up in the private residence. Mrs. Bush invited members of the press, female members of the press, did a little presentation. She had them to answer their questions for 2.5 hours. And after it was over, I remember turning to our press secretary and said, why didn't we do this before? Why didn't we do this before? We did a lot of press briefings before our trips to the Middle East, before our trips to Africa, and we took press, with us. As she started getting a little more attention for this work, press was willing to come. But, at first, they were like, well, what is she going to go do? Cut, ribbons on something somewhere, right? Which is important, too, because, when a president travels overseas, they're always in meetings. They don't make as much time for the cultural things and really showing a sign of respect to your host country, where first ladies typically will do that. So we had some trouble getting press to take us really seriously on some of our foreign trips, but eventually it was great. And we were getting all the top tier press, and then everybody was vying for a seat on the plane. But the press briefings before the trips, I was doing them, our press secretary was doing them. Maybe it would have been a good idea to have Mrs. Bush do them. But the problem is, if she talks to them then they're not going to want to come. And so you're always sort of balancing this. We didn't have a press pool that was Mrs. Obama had at the beginning of the administration, a press pool that was exactly assigned to her. And we had to go begging from the West Wing. But I would go make visits over there. I would go there, our press secretary would go there and go talk to members of the press saying, hey, Mrs. Bush is getting ready to do this, and can we talk to you about it, and sort of garner their interest. I probably didn't do enough of that. I wish I'd done more. I had a very good relationship with the press corps. I would answer their questions. I would do interviews with them. That helps because they can't do it all themselves. They really can't. They have to have surrogates the press trusts as well. That's why I'm still in everybody's Rolodex. Yours too, Catherine.
Right? Your stuff.
On that note, I think we'll end. Let's give these fabulous